Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to your favorite news destination. You're watching In Your Interest with me, Kabir Naqvi. Just a short while ago, VSLG LPG carrier Shivalik just docked at the Mundra port. It's one of the two Indian vessels that have successfully crossed the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz that has been at the center of global attention for more than a fortnight now. And whilst some powers are talking about invading it militarily with their naval expertise, India has done what other people might now be able to take up as a new playbook: quiet and direct diplomacy with Tehran. This is India's Hormuz masterstroke that we are going to break down for you. Take a look at this. We bring to you a story of how quiet, persistent diplomacy has managed to navigate one of the world's most dangerous maritime flashpoints. That's right. The West Asia conflict has blocked the Hormuz Strait. This is the choke point carrying 20% of the global oil and gas, including 40 to 50% of India's crude oil imports and significant LPG supplies. And in this context, India has achieved a quiet but important success right in the middle of the growing tension of the Strait of Hormuz. Two Indian LPG carriers, Shivalik and Nanda Devi, safely crossed the strait. Together, they've been carrying nearly 93,000 tons of LPG for our country. And this happened on the 15th of March, and it has come at a time when many ships are still worried about moving through that narrow shipping lane, but a vital waterway at it. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar explained the situation quite clearly. Speaking to a British daily, he said there is no blanket arrangement with the Iranians for all the ships. Every and each movement is handled one by one. He also said that he is personally talking to the Iranian side and that these direct conversations have already started giving results. His words were simple: it is better to reason together, coordinate, and find a solution than to stay silent. The journey to this moment, it began in late February as the conflict first erupted. Whilst other nations looked towards naval escorts, New Delhi opened a direct line with Tehran. It wasn't easy. Reports suggest there were days of limited contact as the region continued to spiral on, but the persistence of our External Affairs Minister and Prime Minister Modi eventually broke the silence. From the first call on the 5th of March to the critical conversation between Prime Minister Modi and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on the 12th of March, the message from India was consistent. Energy routes must remain open, at least for the neutral partners. And the Iranian leadership responded in kind. President Pezeshkian called India a friend of Iran during his call with Prime Minister Modi. He also said Iran did not start the war and was only defending itself. Then Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi later pointed out that the strait remains open for ships that are not linked to Iran's enemies. He made it clear that neutral vessels, including those heading to India, can pass safely. Well, the work, needless to say, is far from over. With more Indian ships still in the region, in the Persian Gulf, and 611 seafarers to account for, the diplomatic channels remain on high alert. Importantly, India did not give any concessions to get this passage. By securing nearly 93,000 tons of LPG without firing a single shot or granting a single concession, India has protected its kitchens and its economy through the power of the table and dialogue, not the trigger. India's playbook is now being watched by the world. The focus stays on practical talks and protecting our energy needs, and as a result, our gas supplies are secure for now. More ships are expected to be cleared case by case. And this episode shows how steady diplomacy can keep important routes open without raising tensions further. It also highlights that long-standing ties and patient conversations, they still matter in these difficult and trying times. An esteemed set of panelists with us on In Your Interest. And the big questions that we are going to decode tonight. Will India's step-by-step approach become a model for other countries facing similar shipping risks? Can direct talks with Iran continue to protect our energy supplies even if the conflict lasts longer? And how long can India maintain this neutral friend status with Iran whilst simultaneously managing its strategic partnership with the United States and Israel? and a lot more. With us on the broadcast, Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal, former Indian diplomat. Good evening to you, Ambassador. Captain Shyam Kumar, defense and naval expert, with us on the broadcast. And Adit Kothari, foreign affairs and geopolitical expert. Always a pleasure to have you with us, Adit. Ambassador, in terms of energy security, in terms of maritime diplomacy and strategy, in terms of India's global positioning, how do you read this? I mean, give us a sense of what your lens has been. Direct engagement with Iran without any quid pro quo. There are no concessions from our sides. Quiet diplomacy, securing passage for Indian ships, and External Affairs Minister has said there is no blanket agreement with Iran. It's a case-by-case episode. Each vessel's passage is negotiated individually. How do you think India is dealing with this? Give us a sense of what the backroom talks or backroom channels must have sounded like.
Kabir, good afternoon or good evening. Since I'm not part of the conversation which took place now, all I can do is guess from my own experience of the previous such cases when we have to really engage in kind of very delicate diplomacy. Number one, you said without giving it anything. In diplomacy, there is always a quid pro quo. When you do something, there is an expectation of a return. If not now, later or earlier, whatever it is, but there is always a return. And therefore, in this particular case, first, I would like to congratulate our Prime Minister, External Affairs Minister, that the conversations with the Iranian leaders has resulted in passage of the ship across the Straits of Hormuz, and we are getting the supplies to India, the two ships. On the other hand, I just want to basically caution. We have a tendency to rejoice rather prematurely. It's only one-time shipment. And the EM himself said that everything is case-by-case basis. And therefore, every other release of the ship is going to be judged on the basis of what Indian attitude is on the whole issue. And I do remember that we have maintained a very kind of wishy-washy, I will not even call it neutral. We have been vacillating, we have been swinging this way and that way. We are finally coming to strike a balance in our approach to the whole issue, but we are going to be judged by what we do in the United Nations, and that's where it's going to be a very, very delicate balance. But more importantly, very, very importantly, it is not just the passage of ships across the Straits of Hormuz. It's the supply sources. Qatar was the main supply source for the gas to India. Qatar has shut down the supplies. And therefore, even if the ships come through, yes, we will get the oil, but LPG, which is already creating a kind of scene in India, and we have seen the lines and everything, going to remain very critical. And therefore, our energy security, not just energy security, but also the domestic fuel requirements is going to be very heavy. It's going to be a very difficult situation for us. We need to be careful. We need to diversify resources. At the same time, we need to weigh and very carefully our geostrategic position in
And Ambassador, if I may, I'd like to concede here. There is an exclusive reports on Reuters. You're right, diplomacy, there's some sort of give and take. And we're just learning that at least 22 Indian flagged vessels remain in the Gulf, according to the Indian officials. And as India seeks Hormuz's safe passage, Tehran has asked for the return of the seized tankers. So there are 3 Iranian-linked tankers that India seized back in February. So I think that's going to be on the table now.
Yes, and let us see how it goes. I'm quite certain that unless we face pressure from, the other sources. See, Kabir, the issue really here is that over the last more than 1 decade, we have swung heavily in favor of one over the other. And to the extent that even where we can be critical of the unilateral actions, I'm being very, very choosy because I don't want to be called a traitor by some people. But unless we really try to strike a balance and maintain a position which can say that, yes, India is a credible foreign policy spokesperson or interlocutor and can be trusted, it will not mean anything at all. And therefore, all I will say is we need to be very, very cautious
Okay.
in future too.
So it's a situation of us walking on eggshells with this delicate balance that we're trying to do and play out here. Adit, what's your opinion on this? Is this a playbook? Is this a new way of dealing with the Strait of Hormuz choke point that External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has sort of given an example to the rest of the world that instead of militarizing the entire Strait of Hormuz, instead of gunboats, you talk about de-escalation, you talk about opening a direct line, and that's going to actually reap benefits. But then again, the ambassador says it's very delicate. We must remain cautious and not be too happy prematurely, which seems to be a pattern that we're following. What's your opinion on this?
No, absolutely. I think what Ambassador Goel basically pointed out, we do have a habit of prematurely, getting excited and celebrating victories. So we've got to be calibrated and we've got to be much careful about that. Yes, what we have demonstrated is adept diplomacy. We've used and exploited quiet channels. We've had candid conversations, and we have not indulged in escalation at all. So, which basically demonstrates that, while the world is basically requesting for warships and are basically sitting idle, India is just picking up the phone and just having candid conversations on the other side, and which is actually yielding results, which is why even when Dr. Jaishankar was basically talking about that the world must learn, he's actually telling the world that, prioritize your nation's interest first, rather than looking at, somebody else's interest.
No, that's a credible
And
point.
that is what
But
Indian
whilst we prioritize our national interests, what do you think is happening in the White House in Washington? I mean, we're trying to do the best for what we can in terms of strategic value of the India-Iran relationship. Like, take a look at the Chabahar port, the long diplomatic history. What does this reveal about our understanding of the entire Gulf region? I mean, take a look at India's growing prowess and heft in the West Asian sector. But how do you think Donald Trump and his administration is looking at this?
So the one thing clear for Donald Trump's administration is that, geoeconomics and world relations, diplomatic relations do not work on binaries. That is something which India has proved. India is talking to the United States. We're dealing with Israel. We're having security exchanges. We have information sharing arrangements with both the countries. We are buying crude from Russia, and we are dealing with China, and we are dealing with Iran and the rest of the GCC countries. So basically, it's nation's interest first. The quid pro quid happens with every country. You give and take a little bit. The carrot and stick game will continue to play out. India is diversifying its LNG and LPG sources. I believe that Australia and Canada have already reached out and offered India some terms. The only downside with those terms is that it takes a lot of time for those shipments to basically reach India. So the downturn time, which would previously be anywhere typically between 3 to 7 days, is now going to be anywhere between 21 to 27 days. So that is the kind of measures that we have to look at mitigating. But I think internally, India has already decided to go on. There is a clear indication that the ministry has provided to various of the suppliers also to maximize its output. Cut down industry needs and prioritize household needs at this point.
Yeah.
So, the calibrated position of the government seems to be yielding some results. I think what we need to ensure is the checks and balances are put in place to ensure that, we do not get into any sort of a panic-driven situation. I think, some of your journalists were covering as of yesterday, where people had been waiting for hours for cylinders and those kind of things. So those
That's right.
supply choke points need to be ensured that, are completely freed up, and people are not profiteering out of this wartime.
No, you're absolutely right. And, the ministerial briefings every day, they're, of course, building confidence in the citizens across the length and breadth of the nation. With the advent of, LPG carrier Shivalik now coming to the Mundra port, we're talking about 28 lakh cylinders, domestic cylinders that are going to be filled with those 40,000 tons of LPG that it was carrying. But again, highlighting what kind of hegemony and monopoly Iran actually has over the Strait of Hormuz, that very vital and narrow shipping lane. Captain Shyam Kumar, defense and naval expert, with us on the broadcast. Captain Shyam Kumar, from a maritime security perspective, talk to us about the seabed mines, talk to us about what kind of monopoly Iran actually has in the Strait of Hormuz. When Starmer says this is not going to be a NATO-led operation and, Donald Trump is asking all his allies to make their, deploy their naval assets into the Strait of Hormuz to take care of this. I mean, on one hand, he's hammering down on Khark Island. He says, I'm going to bomb it just for fun, maybe. And then on the other hand, you actually know that Iran has some sort of monopoly in the Strait of Hormuz. It's a harrowing task and process to defuse and take care of those seabed mines. They come in all shapes and sizes. So what kind of monopoly does Iran have here? And from the maritime security perspective, how are we dealing with this? 2 tankers have come our way, but what next, sir?
Thank you, Kabir. Jai Hind, son of Varuna. 3 aspects, very, very simple. Number 1, America has gone there with Israel after learning lessons from Gulf wars in history and last year's war. And he has gone full-fledged. He has gone with 3 aims: rogue state of Iran, proxy war through HHH, demilitarization of missiles, and thirdly, the complete dissemination of whatever the uranium he's producing. Regime change may or may not happen as per me, but the southern coast of Iran, the Faras ki Khadi, that Gulf, is going to be dominated by America. Then only it will happen. That is why he has looked at Khark. The second point is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, Trump says, complete annihilation of visible air power and naval power. Is going stepwise so that there is a complete control over this area, and warships have not entered. They are in Oman. They are in Gulf of Oman. Even the Manama Bahrain base, all the naval elements were removed. And you will be very surprised. Yesterday's morning, the minesweepers which were permanently based, the Independence class minesweepers are in Malaysia, Penang. They were removed on 23rd of February. So there was hardly any naval presence of America in that area to save the elements for a next D-Day, which is going to come a little later. The situation is right now not opportune. America is waiting. So he's concentrating on jugular vein and economy, holding, softening the beaches and southern coast of Iran, because there will be no boots on ground. There will be anchor on ground. That means there will be some kind of hold on these areas. Little later, I'm just giving you the future.
Okay.
Now coming to state is difficult. Naval power has been destroyed, but there are mini submarines of 125 tons. They can lay mines or they can remove mines. They have done the selective mining. It could be moored mine, acoustic mine, impact mine, proximity mine, magnetic mine. All kind of mines could be there. And they know about it. The positioning, they know. There's 2 nautical miles, that means 3.5 kilometers going and 3.5 kilometers coming lane. And there is a buffer. That is the only water available for navigation in the state, although the state is 31 kilometers. The southern part is Oman. Oman has got more depth. All the ships are anchored. 28 of Indian ships and other 200 ships are anchored there. And because of this contested water and selective attack on 18 tankers by Iran, people are worried. This movement of 2 tankers has taken place under certain considerations. And our warships, INS Surat and 4 more destroyers under Operation Sankalp, has been in that area for long. 18th of February, INS Surat had visited Bahrain as maritime engagement plans. So we are there and we are doing that. The third part is Chahwa, which is more important. And the talks that we are having with them also includes tomorrow's future energy security requirement. Because if the Chawar port is also attacked and disturbed, then we have invested a lot into it, and that background talk is not coming out, but that is, as you just mentioned, that is the most important point for us. So our naval ships and full fleet is around this place.
Yeah, you rightly pointed out Operation Sankalp to protect the sea lanes. We've shown it before as well. And could Hormuz require a similar deployment? I think we'll have to wait and find out for that. But Ambassador, the European nations are also looking at this. How Jaishankar, very quietly using dialogue and diplomacy, got these 2 oil vessels, crossed from the Strait of Hormuz. They're looking at this playbook. Is there something that they can pick up, that they can learn, or is this all going downhill like the D-Day Captain Sham is talking about?
That's it. There is a difference between how Iran will look at India and the other European nations. Very clearly, uh, let us look at it this way, first of all. I mean, if you look at the entire scenario, attacks on Iran have taken place not from the ships in the Persian Gulf or around the Emirates. Attacks have taken place from the air bases in the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, etc., etc. And therefore, the war has acquired the nature of not really Persian Gulf War, but Arab versus Persia war. And that's a reason Iran had to issue a warning that any attack coming from the countries, the neighboring countries, Iran will retaliate. And therefore, Trump, I think in that sense, is a clever move to turn this into Arab versus Persia. There it is. Now, in that Arab versus Persia, how far will NATO want to be part of it? By basically trying to deploy their own ships, even for escorting the ships out of the Straits of Hormuz. It's a difficult thing to say. France is rather wary. UK has said no. Italy is not ready at all.
Yeah.
I don't think NATO wants to get involved in the war. And therefore, if you talk about the playbook, while India is basically seen as a country trying to get its supplies out of the Straits of Hormuz, NATO intervention will be seen as playing a part in the war. Very different.
All right. But Ambassador, we're calling it the Hormuz masterstroke. You earlier pointed out that, we get happy too soon, too prematurely. Is that the case here? Is this not a masterstroke? The playbook that we're using at the moment?
I think Trump has usually, as per his habit, tried to involve everyone in the war where he should not have. He's trying to expand the war in Middle East to NATO. How can that be a master stroke? I would call it, I'm sorry, but I'm not used to those kind of language. I would call it total idiocy.
Okay. So this is total idiocy. Adit, do you concur with what the ambassador is saying? I mean, India's strategic balancing, India maintains relations in Iran, the United States, Gulf states, Israel simultaneously. The Prime Minister was in Tel Aviv just a fortnight ago. Is India leveraging its strategic autonomy here, or is this a case-by-case experience and this scenario might just blow up or change at any given point in time?
No, I think India's got a very calibrated position on this. I mean, if you look at the way we've basically gone around this, 8 countries, 48 hours, that's the kind of calling mechanism that the Prime Minister basically used. So, he called all the 8 countries, UAE, Saudi, Qatar, Oman, when the attack started. From there on, he pivoted back to, re-establishing connection with the Iranians once, the fiasco happened in the Indian Ocean. That didn't play out very well for the Americans or the Israelis. I mean, that was a disaster, self-sabotaging move, because you've isolated India now. India has to choose for, a different position, which is why, Captain Kumar also mentioned Operation Sankalp. That is where it came in. We have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting over the last 6 years. I mean, just look at the magnitude of Operation Sankalp and how many vessels the Indian Navy has basically escorted and ensured, that the pirates can be actually fielded out. So from that perspective, I think India is very secure. India understands this region very well, and which is why India is probably in a much better place with regards to, say, someone like a European Union or the United Kingdom for matter. United Kingdom has also, they've clearly come out and said that they will not be actively part of the part of this particular war. But inherently they are. I mean, there is intelligence service saying exchanges going on. They've been allowed to use the United Kingdom air bases. So all that is happening. The reason why United Kingdom and other European Union countries do not want to get involved is because of the domestic troubles which will come later on. They already have a hangover of the Iraq war, and they saw what happened domestically. And also one thing that we need to remember is, the British might and the Air Force and the Navy is not what it used to be in the 2003s and the force. I mean, the British naval force is half of what it used to be in 2003. So they clearly do not have the bandwidth to get involved and get entangled into this sort of affair. And I think the Americans also understand and acknowledge that particular aspect. Kabir.
I'm going to give the final word to Captain Sham Kumar. But before that, Captain, let me go across to the ambassador very quickly. Ambassador, you've made credible points and, all of those very pertinent. Essentially, my understanding is that the foreign policy is, treading a icy slope, if I could use that analogy, on eggshells, on very thin ground. So given a chance, given a shot at it, what would you have done differently? Or rather, what would you want to have been done a little differently? Is there some viewpoint that you could throw some light on?
Sorry, Kabir, I wish I could say something here, but if I were in the seat here, I would probably try and advise our good friend Israel not to be so ambitious in terms of their own, shall I say, political ambitions in Middle East. They went to Gaza first. I'm sorry, but they destroyed the whole place. Today, Palestine has become a more live issue than ever before. Iran, which could actually, according to one New York Times article, turn into Iraq. So do we want Iraq to our west, immediate west? And therefore, I think India has a capacity to play a mediatory role. But in that mediatory role, we have to really take a more objective role than being seen as one-sided.
Well, many thanks for those submissions, Ambassador. Captain Sham Kumar, I'll give you the final word here. If this Strait of Hormuz and the entire crisis escalates further, could India be forced to shift from this diplomacy that we've been talking about, the Hormuz masterstroke as we're calling it here on News 9? Could we be forced to shift from diplomacy to naval protection missions? And will India take that kind of action? You've already specified about Operation Sankalp, about the deployment in the Gulf. But is this going to change? Do you see it changing? You already spoke about the D-Day as well.
A continuous operation. Let me tell you, first of all, there is no NATO mission involved here. We just completed Operation Prosperity Guardian when we countered the Houthis. And the forces worked together. India worked alone. Chinese did not work. They were in Bahrain playing football. China does piggyback on keeping the sea lanes of communication open by America because they have the forces, expeditionary forces, and they do it all over the world. And the other people support. So we have done it, Operation Prosperity Guardian, and it's going to be repeated. There is no NATO call here. So please refrain from that. It's not required. President Trump has played a nice card. He is concentrating on offensive posturing in Khark and coastal areas, and he has given Strait of Hormuz to the world to open it because of keeping the oil economy intact. So that is what he has done. Netherlands forces have given support to Charles de Gaulle, and Charles de Gaulle is in Mediterranean, and President Macron visited on 9th of March. He is giving full coverage. And secondly, Abraham Lincoln is there, and Spain, Italy, Britain, HMS Dragon. I have the names of all the ships who are coming up. Tripoli is coming up with the Marines, and the Minesweepers are also following. Bataan is already there in the Indian Ocean for the amphibious missions. D-Day is going to take place. It's going to be a long war. And India is going to play its independent role of protecting sea lanes of communication, escorting ships from wherever it is possible without getting into the trouble. Remember, Strait of Hormuz will become a contested water. And when it becomes contested water, every person has to be cautious, independent, and look at its own areas of interest by diplomacy, by military, or whichever means. We have to also look at Java, as I told you, and now the Bab al-Mandeb. So these choke points have to be monitored well by Indian Navy. We have done it for the last 25 years. I have patrolled in these areas, and it will be a continuous mission. And let me tell you, it will be a long mission. So we should be prepared for it.
All right, all right. Many thanks, gentlemen. Adit, many thanks. Ambassador, always a pleasure to have you with us on News 9. Captain Sham, you've made some credible points. Not boots on the ground, it's going to be anchors on the ground. So clearly, we have to wait and find out and understand what's going to happen. Minesweepers are on their way. Charles de Gaulle, the Abraham Lincoln, all those names that Captain Sham just took. This is going to be a long, drawn-out war. India has showcased that there's a new playbook that is available. We're making sure that diplomacy does its own job. But for how long will it sustain? That's the big question.